All right, everyone. Welcome back to the God Attachment Healing Podcast. Doing a series right now on betrayal trauma with Miss Kendra King. And she was so great in our first episode, sharing about what betrayal trauma is and what that healing process can look like for people. And today we're going to talk a little bit deeper, a little bit more about sex addicts and what that restoration process and redemption process looks like afterwards. This is, again, a topic that happens in Christian circles, and we don't talk about it openly enough. And as we learned in our last episode, one of the healing components to dealing with betrayal trauma is complete vulnerability and openness and putting everything on the table, which is painful, right? And especially when it comes to this idea of having a spouse or partner that is a sex addict, that creates this ongoing feelings of PTSD symptoms, right? Of betrayal, and maybe even make some question their faith. So we'll talk a little bit about that, what that process looks like, what restoration can look like. Does it always mean reconciliation? And even touch on the aspect of forgiveness. But Kendra, welcome back to the show. It's good having you.
Thank you. It was so good to do the first episode, and I am so honored to be back for the second one.
Awesome. I am as well. This is a great topic to discuss. Not so much because it's obviously it's not a fun topic, but it's a necessary
Mm-hmm.
topic, right?
It
One that needs
is.
to be discussed. And
Yes,
even you
yes.
mentioned in the last episode about how the church handles things,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
due to not being equipped to do so, or
mm-hmm,
only to being taught one way, which we discussed
mm-hmm.
was sometimes we try to approach emotional, mental, physical aspects by only addressing the spiritual, and that's just
Right,
not the way
right,
that God wired us, right?
right, right.
Um, but today's topic is a little bit more specific, and this is a
Okay.
growing problem for both men and women. Men have been more known to be the sex addicts,
Right,
but
right.
there's this growing literature on women also
Mm-hmm.
participating in this.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
can you share a little bit about that, like what you've seen? Because this is not something that this is something that the culture has shifted, I think,
Mm-hmm,
in men and
mm-hmm,
women. But
mm-hmm.
yeah, what have you seen regarding that?
So I believe in regards to the men being more prevalent
Hmm.
in this particular field, it's just because of how they get caught, right? There's a sense of women being able to kind of manipulate and kind of communicate in a way, or operate in a way where it's kind of low key. It's not, it's more you can explain things away. It's not as just out there as men engage in it. So it's more subtle. Women are more subtle in the way they approach things. However, it still hurts the same way.
Yeah.
It still hurts the same way. And from my level of understanding is that there's some men that stay, some men do not.
Mm.
There's a nature. It's I think it has a lot to do with how the societal norms and stereotypes of men and women, and the expectations of, well, if a man cheats on a woman, she should stay. In
Mm.
comparison, if a man cheat, or if a woman cheats on a man, oh, you just leave her. Why?
Mm.
Why? I've always had that question. It's
Yeah.
like this hierarchy, just like when they talk about equality and work and pay and all. It's the same setup in
Mm.
relationships, and it's unfortunate because men and women both are human beings. There's still a
Mm.
level of hurt. There's still a level of betrayal. However, there's still a grace that should be shown, especially if she wants to do better, be better, show you something different, work on herself. I think she's owed the same grace as if the shoe was on the other foot. But these
Sure.
are just my thoughts. These are
Yeah.
just my thoughts, but it's
Mm.
it's it's unfair at times. And just like when it comes to domestic violence, it's more of a shame on men. But women do the same thing. It's just more subtle, it's
Mm.
emotional, it's verbal, it's not as physical in nature. Can be, but I feel as though there's a
Mm,
balance in engagement on both
mhm.
ends. On
Yeah,
both
yeah.
ends.
No, that's great insight. You mentioned that it looks more subtle for women than it does for men.
Mm-hmm.
So when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about sex addiction specifically,
Mm-hmm.
that space
Mm-hmm.
is either cheating with another person, like having sex with another person, and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
being in that addictive
Mm-hmm.
cycle of just
Mm-hmm.
choosing all these different, so constant cheating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the
Mm-hmm.
porn addiction, which is okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's your go-to for releasing and so on, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
consistent thing that's caused significant issues in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's typically associated with men.
Mm-hmm.
But with women, you said that it's more subtle. Now, by
Mm-hmm.
subtle, do you mean that they're not really seeking out relationships sexually? Or are you saying
Mm-hmm.
that it's more emotional and therefore it's not the same
Mm-hmm.
gravity as the men's? Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
you referring to when you say that it's more subtle for women?
Oh, Sam. Oh, Sam. Yes,
Mm,
it's more so emotional
okay.
because at times, not all men, but a lot
Mhm.
struggle with being able to hold space emotionally for their partner
Mm,
because there was a lack of cultivation emotionally when they were growing up in childhood, or they've had experiences in previous intimate relationships where their emotions were weaponized against them in a sense of, oh, you're not man enough. I need you to be more whatever, whatever, masculine and all this other stuff. And it's just like, okay, so
mm,
when they get in a relationship with a woman who they're trying to be with or establish a relationship, they're struggling with how do I show up?
mhm,
Well, some may show up in a way where they can't connect emotionally. So the woman goes out, finds a man who is more so vulnerable and sharing, holding space for how she feels, maybe being engaging and emotional connection with her too,
mhm,
whatever the case may be. Or you can have a man who is vulnerable with his significant other or his spouse, and the woman is just like, I'm not trying to
mm,
engage in that because she has her own emotional detachment, emotional trauma that she's experienced at some point in her life. And she's like, I am not trying to go there with you on that.
mm,
I just want a man to show up for me in a materialistic sense or in a sense of presenting masculine protection and all this. I'm not trying to go down that road with being vulnerable and sharing my emotions. So it could
mm.
be either or.
Okay.
Be either
So they
or.
seek that out, is what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To avoid the emotional, to going back to
Connection.
those emotions.
Yes, yes.
Gotcha.
Because there are women out here who lack emotional connection or lack being able to be vulnerable with their emotions, share them,
Mm,
express them, because they observed women that shared the same behaviors or they tried to engage in vulnerabilities emotionally and they were dismissed or neglected or
mm,
gaslit or whatever the case may be. So there's some type of emotional trauma that they've experienced as well that keeps them from being able to connect with a more vulnerable man.
mm.
So,
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So that brings up one of the common question I think that people have
mhm,
is it true based on your experience and what you've seen in the literature, the idea of men typically cheat. It's a physical thing, not
mm,
emotional, right? So it's just
yes.
for whatever it is, a release, whatever the case was. Not that's justifiable, but
Mm-hmm.
that's their reason. And for women, it's more emotional. So if they're not getting emotional
Mm-hmm.
needs met in the relationship in the marriage, they find it somewhere
Mm-hmm.
else, and that
Mm-hmm.
opens the door for sexual
Mm-hmm.
encounters. Is
Mm-hmm.
that what you're seeing?
Yes, that
Okay.
is the majority of what it looks like. For
Oh, the
men, it's
majority.
a majority. I
Okay.
would say there's still room for those who where it's the opposite, right?
Mm,
But for the majority, it's a physical. You hear like, "Oh, I didn't really love her. I really didn't like her like that. She provided me sexual engagements that I didn't get from you. So then you have that blaming thing again. You weren't fulfilling me
Mm,
sexually. She did. And that's all it was about, or whatever the case would be. And then you have the woman who's just like, you weren't there for me emotionally. And I didn't feel safe with talking to you about my feelings. And you just ignored me, or you didn't have anything to say. So I went over here and was talking to him, and he made me feel seen and heard. And he listened
mm,
to me and all this other stuff. That is the majority of
mm.
what it looks like when it comes to the gender comparisons. However, there are outliers.
Yeah. Yeah.
There
Always.
are outliers out there.
Mm,
But literature wise, what I've seen is the majority.
yeah.
That's kind of the setup.
Hmm. It's, at what point does it become an addiction, right? There's a lot of back and forth around the word addiction, right?
It
Because
is. It
some people
is.
talk about it as a biological thing, so they try to explain like in
Mm-hmm.
evolutionary terms, where well, you're
Mm-hmm.
wired this way, you're wired to seek out
Mm-hmm.
pleasure, and
Mm-hmm.
this comes into conflict for Christians because the Christian belief is right. We died to sin, we
Mm-hmm.
died to ourselves, so there has to be
Mm-hmm.
kind of a suppression of that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, a killing of that sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so so what does addiction actually look like? When we talk about addiction, it sounds like so far we've been talking about it's a one-time thing, a two-time thing, maybe there's
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness and you try to work on things moving forward. But when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about addiction, we're talking about something that's been continuous,
Mm-hmm.
that has been very prevalent, maybe for
Mm-hmm.
it has been going on for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what do you refer to when we talk about addiction and sex addiction in particular?
Okay, so specifically with sex addiction or just addiction in general. Let's just define addiction in
Hmm.
general, right?
Hmm.
Addiction, anything that you engage in an unhealthy way that disrupts every aspect of your life.
Hmm.
Relationships, work, a relationship with yourself, just it completely you are so consumed in this particular thing that you it takes prevalence over anything. Or if you
Hmm.
don't want to use the word addiction, compulsivity. You're
Yeah.
compulsively engaging in this whatever this is on a consistent basis where it keeps you so consumed that that's all you want to do.
Hmm. That's
So
good description.
that is addiction or aka compulsivity, right?
Hmm.
And in an unhealthy engagement in something.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Good.
So to address the biological pleasure, Christianity, we die to self, all this other stuff. You are human. Okay? You have dopamine in your
Yeah.
brain. Anything that triggers that dopamine to flow, guess what? It's pleasurable.
Mm.
I don't care if it's you reading a book, you going outside to feel the sun, you watering your plants, you
Mm.
walking your dog. It triggers dopamine.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't go away. That's how you're made up
Hmm.
genetically.
Hmm.
However, when you're constantly triggering that dopamine to flow in something that's unhealthy, that becomes addiction
Mm.
or compulsivity that's unhealthy.
Yeah. Mm.
So you can die to flesh all you want to as a believer, right?
Hmm.
It's dopamine still is there. It does not go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's something that you have to be mindful of.
Mm-hmm. And
Uh,
one huge piece of that too is that the dopamine, once you receive a certain amount of it, the next
yes.
step is wanting more. So it
More.
goes into that deeper
Yes.
cycle, right? Mm.
Yes. Yes. So
Yeah.
that is the biological makeup of
Mm.
that. For those who want to side with the more religious view, the more Christian structured, strict view,
Hmm.
you're human. It
Yeah.
doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Just
That's good.
know that.
No. No,
If you
that's
don't
good.
take anything from this podcast, please take that.
Right.
Take that.
No, that's good. That's good. So we're saying then that people who are addicted allow
Mm-hmm.
for this space in their life, sexual addiction, whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
to take over so much
Yes.
so that it disrupts all the other areas of their lives.
Yes.
Okay. And it's
Yes.
compulsive and it could be in that addictive nature and so
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what characteristics do they share? Like, do they have certain either personality characteristics or habits that make them more prone to being addicted? Or is it
So,
just okay?
and not to interrupt you,
No, you're
I
good.
apologize.
You're good.
It could be biological, right? Say there is addiction or mental health struggles within parents,
Mm,
grandparents, right? Sets up patterns. It could be societal, right? We were exposed from our peers,
mm,
siblings, and that built it up. Or it could be something that you just kind of fall into and that you trigger that dopamine and
mm,
you just build it up, build it up, build it, and you're constantly chasing that high. So there's different levels of how it can form. However, it still ends up leading to the same thing.
Okay. And one of the things that we often look to, and you kind of touched on it, the idea of history or biology.
Mm-hmm.
But there is this one piece of level of exposure. You kind of mentioned that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think what we're finding is that the youngest age, and this is for boys, I don't know what it is for girls, it might be around the same age.
Mm-hmm.
Exposure to pornography is, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's like 6 years old, the last time
Mm-hmm.
I read.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of sets up, and I've had a lot of clients who talk about the level of exposure. And it could
Mm-hmm.
have been in passing, it was an
Mm-hmm.
uncle or a friend that showed them something,
Mm-hmm.
and then from that point on, moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these clients who come in, they enter a relationship, and this has been going on for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
may be every couple of months, or maybe they start with it every other day, or whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
W-
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the addictive piece, what do you see mostly regarding, like, do you see a lot of people who, when they share their story, it
Mm-hmm.
started in their childhood like that? They were
Mm-hmm.
exposed to pornography early on?
Mm-hmm. So you have a level of exposure when it comes to porn,
Hmm.
or level of exposure when it comes to just sexual topics in nature, or you have sexual
Sexual abuse.
trauma.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
So there's a lot of sexual trauma there with men and women.
hmm. It's so sad.
It is sad. It
Yeah.
is sad. And oh, I'm gonna go there because this is the space
Mm,
within the Christian body.
yeah. Mm,
It's so deep because it could have happened within the church,
yeah.
within the state. Like it's so deep, but we sweep it under the rug.
Mm,
We sweep it under the rug until it presents itself in a more public form, and then you want to address it.
right, right. Mm,
But there's a level of let's hide it, let's keep it secret, specifically in the church,
yeah.
in all religions, but in the church. And it doesn't matter, Catholic, Christian, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the church.
Yeah.
And it's sad or it's familial. And you're sweeping it
Mm,
under the rug, especially when it comes to Black and brown people.
mm, yeah.
Uncles, cousins. Oh, if it's shared, or if the person tells their parents or tells somebody, oh, it's like a little quick, let's hurry up and like sweep this, we'll address it. But you still have your child exposed to this person because the person's part of the family, but you don't want to cause any ripple effects. And I've had
Mm,
clients to where it was sexual trauma from their own parents.
mm, mm-hmm.
And it's just in this hiding, this secrecy. Then the church knew about it and all this stuff
Oof.
happened, but it was still a lever, like that is re-traumatizing over and normalizing it
Mm, mm-hmm.
instead of addressing it and calling it for what it is.
Right.
So I have a big issue when it comes to church
Mm-hmm.
and religion and familial and hiding and
Yeah.
Mm, it's a trigger for me. It's a trigger
Yeah.
for me because I see it. I see
Mm-hmm.
it. And it's sad.
It
It's
really
really
is.
sad.
It really is because it puts that justice hat on for us, right?
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
wish you could do something, and
Mm-hmm.
both the client themselves feel powerless in that situation because it's a
Mm-hmm.
parent, it's a family member, or not being
Yeah.
believed, right?
Yes.
And there is that shock factor, I think, that for the people, whether it be the parents or people in the church, when they hear it, it's
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable, right? They think to themselves,
Right.
there's no way my
Mm-hmm.
brother, sister would have done that, or my aunt or uncle would
Mm-hmm.
have done that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so how does that show up then? Because typically I feel like children are not heard, right? There's that piece of
Mm-hmm.
children are not heard, that
Yes.
sometimes they lie and all of these things. So when it's something big like this, I think
Mm-hmm.
what keeps it hidden is the shame that the people have for allowing it
Mm-hmm.
in some way to happen. Does
Mm-hmm.
that sound
Mm-hmm.
about right?
Yes. And on top of that, Sam, you shift the blame onto the child.
Yeah. Mm.
It's the child's, oh, well, you shouldn't have been too
Mm.
close, or you shouldn't have worn that, or you shouldn't have been there, and all this stuff. This is a child,
Yeah. Yeah.
an adolescent, and you're holding them accountable for trauma that was impacted and projected upon them. How
Mm.
dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you? And then when it's unresolved, then they become adults and they start acting out in these unhealthy, compulsive ways,
Mm.
sexually, porn, drugs, alcohol, whatever. And you're trying to figure out where it all started. Well, it
Mm.
started when they shared that they were sexually traumatized by a family member or by someone within the church. And, excuse me, they went to tell the person they felt emotionally safe with, and
Mm.
they didn't believe them, and
Mm.
then blamed them,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then still subjected them to the person that did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh.
It's so deep, Sam.
Mhm.
It's so deep. It's so deep, and it's so sad. It's
It,
so sad, and it's just like that is where the emotional safety, feeling seen and feeling heard. That's where that starts. That is where
mhm.
that trauma starts. That emotional trauma starts right there.
Yep.
Right there. Because there is no, I can't go to figures in power. I can't go to my family or people that I feel that protect me to, I don't feel safe with them. If I don't
Mhm.
feel safe with them, who can I feel safe with?
That's true. Yeah. So they take that into relationships and not being
Mm-hmm.
able to be fully vulnerable because at some point they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be believed or heard or something,
Mm-hmm.
which
They were
continues to lead to the acting
violated.
out.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were violated.
Hmm. Wow. No, this is really powerful, Kendra. I think that is something that maybe we can address here where
Mm-hmm.
when parents hear something like, or just anyone in the church, when they hear
Mm-hmm.
something like this about sexual abuse, someone gets accused, hey, so and so touched me in
Mm-hmm.
this way, they did this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what should that process look like for them
Mm-hmm.
to look into that? Because we want to protect the children
Mm-hmm.
and we want to go and directly ask maybe the person that was
Mm-hmm.
accused.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to figure out what could we share with the audience that how do you address an issue like that?
Well, number one, if it's a child, believe them. Anything
Mm.
sexual in nature, if they come to
That's a
you
good
and
point.
they're like, "Hey, so and so touched me and it made me feel uncomfortable," or they did, however they believe, it's a child. No
Mm,
child should be talking to you or sharing things of sexual nature who weren't exposed. So
right.
believe them.
Mm,
Believe them. And then you start the process of let's really investigate this. Let's
hmm
confront this person. I don't care who is there with you to confront the person. We need to confront this person and we need to figure out a way to be able to keep this baby safe.
hmm
If
hmm
it's letting the person go out the church, disconnect,
Do
making
it.
sure that this person, if it's a family member, making sure that this person is not around this child and ever. I don't care what you do.
Hmm
But if you don't, you are setting this child up to be traumatized and live a life as an adult of not being emotionally safe,
hmm
not secure, validated. Like it's just going to be a snowball effect.
hmm
It's gonna, and if we're gonna sit up here and say our children are our future and we have to protect the babies and all that other stuff, walk in that.
Yeah.
Walk in that.
Mm.
Don't just give lip service to that, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't understand what that essentially will do to them
Sure.
if they don't feel a sense of protection. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care if it does sound far-fetched, investigate it
Right.
like thoroughly.
Mm.
So, it's just it's really hard when it
Yeah.
comes to addressing sexual trauma that has been inflicted upon a child within a family setting or within the church setting. It is hard because there's a sense of well, how am I gonna look? Or
Right.
how is the church gonna look? Like, is if you're more worried about your reputation than the
Mm-hmm.
protection of an individual, you are not in the service of others at
Yeah.
all. You do
Mm-hmm.
not belong in any position of power to help people do anything,
Yeah.
because those are
Mm.
the most vulnerable, are our
Yeah.
children. So you
Mm-hmm.
have an obligation to exercise that. You have a
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to really protect them and show them the way. Because
Right.
if you don't, it's going to show up. It's
Absolutely.
going to
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah. I was thinking about, children usually go to the people that they feel safest with,
Mm-hmm.
and they share with them. And we're reversing. Let's say that that parent addresses, like,
Mm-hmm.
who did this? They look into
Mm-hmm.
it, they protect the child.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
security or that
Mm-hmm.
attachment to that security figure becomes
Mm-hmm.
strengthened because I
Yes.
trusted you with something that I felt scared about sharing with you,
Mm-hmm.
that I know
Mm-hmm.
could probably cause some issues, and you
Mm-hmm.
protected me and defended. So that becomes like the strongest bond that they would
Yes, it
have,
does.
right? And
It
when they're
does.
representing God, or when they
Mm-hmm.
are in the church, like, again, it changes or connects to their view of God. Like, God protected me.
Mm-hmm.
He used my family. He used this person. But to
Mm-hmm.
your point, it is sad that we still hear that these stories are happening within the
Mm-hmm.
church. But it brings up another issue where the ones who are not addressing it, and I have seen this where they have not dealt with something that they have experienced themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because we usually see like this trend of, if someone was sexually abused, then
Mm-hmm.
their generation also becomes that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's shame around it. There's so much shame
Mm-hmm.
around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you've seen that as well. Like this generation, it's not a generational that it has to happen. I don't believe in
Mm-hmm.
deterministic things like that, but it's more,
Mm-hmm.
you do see a pattern of, if someone was sexually
Mm-hmm.
abused, that tends to happen in the next generation and so
Mm-hmm.
on. And for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, the setting, the environment, the
Mm-hmm.
not dealing with the shame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So I classify it or give it a name of generational dysfunction,
Mm,
right? You say your mom it had an experience like that. You come to her and it's a trigger
mhm,
because she went through the same thing but wasn't protected, wasn't validated. There was nothing happened. They don't know how to show up
yeah.
because they're triggered. That inner child who had that, you don't know what to do.
Hmm.
You had no form of example on how to address these things. And it does fall.
Yeah.
And so the default is, well, I'm going to engage in the same behaviors that
Mm.
people engaged in when it happened to me.
Yeah.
So you're creating this generational dysfunction of pattern. And it just keeps until somebody stops it.
Mm,
Somebody says, no, I am not going to sweep this under the rug, act like this is not happening, ignore it, whatever. I'm not going to do this anymore.
mm,
So it has to be an intentional choice of, I don't care what this looks like and how this can make me seem to other people. It's gotta stop. It's
yeah.
gotta stop. So yes, it is a sense of how we say, when somebody inflicts sexual trauma on somebody else, it's probably happened to them.
Mm,
Just in the same, when somebody's experienced sexual trauma and they have it in unresolved, and then their child or a family member comes to them and shares that, and
mm,
they respond the same way that somebody responded to their situation, and it was unhealthy and it wasn't proactive and it
hmm.
didn't protect them. It's the It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing.
Oof. Ah, such a tough topic. Such a tough
Oh, Sam, it
topic.
is. It is. But it's like
Mm.
we gotta stop. We gotta stop hiding. I'm
Yeah.
so tired of hiding. I'm so tired of the church hiding from the deeper issues. You
Mm.
want to talk about all this other stuff and just skim on this topic. And it's just like, no, I am not that person. I am not that Christian. I am not that believer because I have personal experience. So
Mhm.
that shifts my approach
Yeah.
because not only am I professionally knowledgeable and understand, but I also know it from a personal perspective. And
Mm.
no, I'm obligated.
Mm.
God has called me to use my voice to share my story. I don't got no shame or no guilt in anything that I've experienced because
Mm.
it helps shift and change lives. It brings light to people's darkness and it gives
Mm.
them a sense of hope and inspiration and motivation to do something.
Mhm.
You have to do something in order to change or shift the narrative.
Yeah.
So I will talk about it, whether it be
Yeah.
in church or whether it be out in the street. I don't care.
Right.
This is the whole purpose. We don't engage in passions and callings and being chosen just so we can hide our light. God did not call us to hide our
Mm.
light at all. You're
Yeah.
supposed to be the salt and the light of the earth, right? Well, how do you do
Mhm.
it? You go out there.
Yeah.
You go
Yeah.
out there in all
Mm.
your glory and you believe God. He's going to protect you and keep you while you're out here trying to help others. And you
Mhm.
use your story, you use your example to change and shift things.
Yeah.
That is how people become better and healthier versions of themselves. You use
Mhm.
yourself as a example, as a sacrifice. You lay yourself on the altar.
Mm. I love that, Kendra. I love that. I love your heart for this space
Mm-hmm,
and for helping people in that and bringing awareness to it because I'm with you. Like these are things that need to be discussed. And
mm-hmm,
the title of this podcast is God Attachment Healing. And the
mm-hmm,
reason, excuse me, because a lot of her was happening within the church, I
mm-hmm.
was noticing that people start to shift in their attachment or relationship with God.
Yes.
And so, okay, so how does that healing look like? So if we're hurt in relationship, we're in a healing relationship, that's relationship with people that are trustworthy and also in a
Mm-hmm,
relationship with God. But one thing as we're talking about this that came to mind was this aspect of forgiveness, right? When
mm-hmm,
people have been hurt, sexually abused, there's trauma, all of
mm-hmm,
these things. One of the
mm-hmm,
common go-tos for people is, well, we need to forgive that person or vice versa, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I'm curious, we talk often about the difference between forgiveness
mm-hmm,
and reconciliation. A
mm-hmm,
person who was sexually abused by a family member, by someone in the church, um, the Christian duty or the thing that they're
mm-hmm,
going to be recommended to do is to forgive. But
mm-hmm,
that looks very different
mm-hmm,
as an adult or even as a child
mm-hmm,
to forgive someone who did something like that to
mm-hmm,
them, right?
mm-hmm,
So what would forgiveness look like, or is that even, I mean, dare I say, is that even something that they should be focusing on when
mm-hmm.
they're, trying to process that trauma?
Okay. So people assume that forgiveness is for the other person. Yes and no. It is because you want to release them from the guilt and the obligation and the shame, all that other stuff.
Mm.
However, it's essentially for you. And until you forgive that person, you are going to be in your own prison within yourself. And it
Mm.
cultivates a sense of a victim mindset. And you
Mm.
carry that for, through resentments, through disconnect, through the lack of connection, the desire to you can't trust people, and all this other stuff. You imprison yourself.
Mhm.
That's all it is. Now, you can forgive someone. That doesn't mean that you have to reconcile.
Right.
Where does it say in scripture that we have to reconcile?
Mm.
It is not an obligation. You can forgive someone and you can let them go.
Mm.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. But you do have to forgive them and you do have to love them because that's what you're called to do.
Mm.
But you don't have to have them in your space. You don't have to have them in your environment. You don't have to talk to them anymore.
Mm,
After you release them, you let them go and you move on with your life. That doesn't mean that doesn't come up the thoughts of being hurt by this person in whatever way that happened
mm-hmm.
won't get triggered again because essentially it may.
Yeah.
PTSD kind of carries on through life. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, you forgive them, you forgive yourself, but you move on through your healing process and working through that.
Mm,
Now, if you want to reconcile with this person, that is your choice.
yeah. Mm,
That is your choice. I've seen it done. I've
mm-hmm.
seen it done where sexual trauma has been inflicted upon a person and they have worked through and healed, excuse me, and processed
Mm,
and understood and released, yet they still wanted to reconcile. And
mm,
that was okay too. They just wanted to be able to be in a space to move past this elephant in the room.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's call it for what it is. Let's acknowledge it. Let's heal through it. Let's be active on being able to letting this go, letting the denial go, letting the shame go, letting the guilt go, all this. I forgive you. So I'm releasing you from a prison that you've put me in, but you also put yourself in.
Mm,
However, I still want to be in communion with you.
mm.
That's okay too.
Yeah. It's so powerful. Um, yeah, difficult but powerful. And I like that you provided those aspects, what forgiveness is and what it isn't.
Mm-hmm,
Um, we kind of jumped into this topic on what the restoration process will look like after
mm-hmm,
betrayal, but I think one
mm-hmm.
of the things that we realize as we're talking now is that this aspect of betrayal really stems from unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is maybe a lot of unresolved trauma is leading
Mm-hmm,
to these aspects of betrayal.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
so, as we've discussed that, is there anything that we missed, anything that you feel we need to address so that the audience leaves with an understanding of, there's a lot of people that are hurt in the church. And if
Mm-hmm.
this is you right now who maybe haven't addressed
Mm-hmm.
unresolved trauma or betrayal or sexual abuse or anything like that, what would they need to do? We talk about personal healing, taking
Mm-hmm.
accountability, forgiveness, and so on. But is there something that you would share with them that would be helpful?
Yeah. So I'll leave the audience with this, right? We all walk around in life as adults with emotional baggage,
Mm,
right? Has a lot of stuff in it, but we're all carrying it around, right? It's just a little carry on. Stop and open it
mm.
up.
Yeah.
Open it up.
Mm,
Sift through what belongs to you and what doesn't.
mm, mm-hmm,
And when you figure out what does, start there
mm-hmm,
because it's you have it this state of denial that, oh, I'm fine. No, you're not. None of us are
mm.
fine. We're never fine. We are never fine. There is
Mm,
something going on within
mm,
us at all times that we're battling constantly. Constantly acknowledge it.
mm,
Acknowledge it. Give yourself grace to work through it.
mm-hmm,
But you can't continue to exist in this state of denial because it's going to be a barrier from you really being able to walk fully and lighthearted and feel a sense of liberation in your relationship with God, in your relationship with others.
mm-hmm,
Like it is really impacting your ability to be fulfilled in life,
mm-hmm.
in your relationships, in the things that you're passionate about. Because it's a constant nag. It's a constant nag. And it doesn't go anywhere.
No.
It doesn't go anywhere. It follows you around. It is your shadow.
Mm-hmm.
It is your shadow self. So, yes,
Start
let's
there.
deal with this stuff. Just start there. Just
Mm-hmm.
start there.
Good words, Kendra. Wow. Well, this was a heavy topic, but I'm glad we
Yes,
touched on it.
me
And
too.
you have great expertise and insights on
Thank
the topic. And
you.
I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
that you sharing with us
Yes.
and the audience.
Yeah.
And we'll have to do another one. I like
We
talking with you.
will. I
Yes.
like talking to you, Sam. You're so
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you, Kendra. Kendra, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience about contact, know more about
Sure.
you or information,
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah. So, audience members, if you want to find me, reach out to me, you can Google Kendra King, Charlotte, North Carolina. I will come up. Or you can go to the healinghearttherapycenter.com,
Mm,
or you can email me, Kendra at thehealinghearttherapycenter.com.
mm.
And yeah, just go from there. You
Sounds
can
good to
find
me.
me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Uh, great conversation, Kendra. I
Yes,
appreciate it.
great.
And yeah, hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Yes, soon. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Kendra.